If it was not quite heck of a job Brownie today, it was dangerously close. Our third story tonight, the Bush administration faced once again with American cities underwater, only this time two potential presidents offer alternatives. After spending most of the Midwest flooding crisis in Europe, Mr. Bush today discussed how his administration, including the same Homeland Security Secretary who ran FEMA during Katrina, is responding this time.
I've been briefed by Secretary Chertoff and Secretary Schaefer and Director Paulison about the response. First task at hand is to deal with the floodwaters, to anticipate where the flooding may next occur. Unfortunately, I've been to too many disasters as president.
Really? First I'm hearing of it. To the president's point, the Army Corps of Engineers already anticipated the next flooding. The Associated Press obtaining yesterday an Army Corps map showing 27 levees in danger of overflowing along the Mississippi. One levee did fail today in Illinois. And while Mr. Bush today said he would visit the region on Thursday and that the waters are now receding, the Mississippi, in fact, has still not reached its crest in some areas, including the Illinois town where Barack Obama went to help fill sandbags 3 days ago. Obama also asking his supporters to volunteer on his website, soliciting donations for flood relief. McCain, meanwhile, raised funds for himself this weekend, has not visited the region, and yesterday issued a two-sentence press release about the floods. On that note, let's turn to MSNBC political analyst Rachel Maddow, whose own air program airs weeknights on Air America Radio. Good evening, Rachel.
Hi, Keith.
Senator McCain's wounds in the war and his time as POW precludes him getting out and filling up sandbags. But was this conservative blogger Andrew Sullivan right that Obama's contrast with Bush after Katrina was powerful and is one of those sort of iconic images that may carry a lot more than great policy or great words?
The contrast is striking. The fact that he was there relatively early, I mean, this is an ongoing disaster, but he was there relatively early. He was there at a time when there wasn't already blanket national media coverage of what was going, and by being there, he attracted more media coverage than there otherwise would have been. The fact that he was doing something practical on the ground alongside regular Americans who were also trying to do practical on the ground sorts of types of help. It is the exact visual opposite of Bush flying over the already inundated Gulf Coast after he had finally realized that maybe his vacation had gone on a few days too long.
Like he's looking out there going, I see land. Yeah. But as to Mr. McCain, he was obviously the day before this, he and Bush were celebrating his birthday, McCain's birthday. Has he improved his performance in this, or did he still miss out on Woody Allen's rule, which is 80% of life is showing up?
Well, before locking up the Republican nomination for president, as far as I know, John McCain took one public tour of New Orleans post-Katrina. And then once he was running for president, he's now been to New Orleans and been to the Gulf Coast before. But as a senator, before he had that nomination, he'd been there once. He voted against extending unemployment benefits to Katrina survivors. Yes. He voted against extending Medicaid benefits to Katrina survivors. He voted against investigating the cause of the levee failures in New Orleans.
And denied later that he did any of those votes.
Yes. Yes. That's right. When asked about it by a local New Orleans reporter when he was down there on one of his photo ops since he's been running for president, he was asked why he voted twice against investigating the levee collapses, and he said, I don't know what you're talking about. So, I mean, since the Midwest has been inundated in this current round of flooding, John McCain has mostly been in Texas. He gave his big speech to oil executives today talking about the joys of drilling off the coast. I don't know if he's going to show up and do either a photo op or something substantive, but I think it would send a good message if he did. Yeah,
at some point, maybe towards the fall. Yeah. But how do they stack up, photo ops aside, in terms of prevention or immediate response to this? Because obviously we have. Whatever the causes of this are, we are in a cycle where we're getting more bad weather for whatever reason that is.
Yeah.
And the ultimate answer is there's going to be more flooding, whether it's from right. sea or from rivers down the middle of the country.
It's more bad weather, and the causes, as you say, are a whole different topic of discussion, but it's also failing infrastructure.
Yep.
I mean, we had a great investment in infrastructure in, say, the era of Eisenhower, and then a generation later, and a generation before that, we had a great investment in infrastructure in the great works projects, in the works projects of the WPA and those other types of projects of that era. We skipped a generation in infrastructure. A generation after Ike, it was the time of Reagan, and we should have been investing in infrastructure all again 30 years later, just like we had 30 years before.
Not if you're going to spend the time breaking the air traffic controllers union as your principal labor issue. Yeah.
Yeah, it is weather, and it is global warming, and it is issues like that, but it's also how resilient we are as a country, and a big part of that is our infrastructure. And so John McCain could prove himself to be a very different kind of Republican by saying, you know what, one part of Ronald Reagan's legacy and the legacy of conservatism and the Republican Party that I reject is that we should neglect our infrastructure. I reject that. I believe that levees are not pork. I believe that we should invest in our infrastructure because it is an investment in our national strength. That would be a great movement, a great moment from John McCain. We haven't seen that yet.
Or he could just say, I don't know what you're talking about, which could also be true. Rachel Maddow of Air America and MSNBC, that's a nice color in your jacket. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm glad to see you got the memo. Thanks.
Funny, this commercial talks about how these folks are voting Republican, but I'm not hearing them say many pro-Republican things in the commercial. What's up with that? And this is exactly what it looks like. Barack Obama transposed into the monkey Curious George. And the inventors, who first apologized for this textbook minstrel show kind of racism, have now changed their minds and are coming out with it anyway. Worst persons next on Countdown. So why did Governor Jennifer Granholm of Michigan take off her shoe before introducing Al Gore at the Barack Obama event last night? Why did that make me think of Castro and not Khrushchev? And for whom does Chauncey Billups, who preceded the governor, play basketball? That's ahead, but first time for our number 2 story, Countdown's Worst Persons in the World. Our bronze tonight to David and Elizabeth Lawson of West Jordan, Utah. They had created something called the Sock Obama, a ripoff of Curious George, which depicts the Democratic candidate as a monkey. After the expected response, they apologized and said they were withdrawing the item from sale. But they've now told a local newspaper that, quote, a few new opportunities have been presented, and they were retracting the apology and going into production. Okay, for what, 150 years, first among the most obvious racial insults to blacks in this country has been to compare them to monkeys and other simians. 25 years ago, Howard Cosell, who was the most non-racist guy in sports, nearly got fired for calling Alvin Garrett of the Washington Redskins a little monkey. If I'm still not getting through to you, Mr. and Mrs. Lawson, here's the level of racism and prejudice you're showing. It's as if somebody made Mr. and Mrs. Lawson dolls, only they made 3 of them because they thought it'd be funny and appropriate to assume you're a husband and 2 wives because you guys are from Utah. Our runner-up, Greg Jarrett of Fix News, not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, but seriously, a Shahab missile fired from Iran, he said, quote, could actually hit, I think, some military installations in the United States. Distance from Tehran to Washington, D.C., 6,300 miles. Distance a Shahab missile can fly, 1,200 miles. Please, Greg. John Moody and the other Fox guys spend a lot of time writing up those political talking points for you. Please take the time to read them or just recite them outright. Don't hinder the network's vital propaganda work. Thank you. But our winner, the foremost quack in American government, the monstrous Representative Darrell Issa of California, during a series of tributes on the floor of the House this afternoon, in memory of Tim Russert, while the wake was going on, Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton of Washington said, our hearts are breaking. Fortunately, Mr. Issa doesn't have one of those. No story of Tim Russert would be complete if we didn't talk about loss this political season, he began his remarks. We're going to miss Tim Russert when it comes to the people on both sides of the issue of why we have $5 gasoline and $135 oil. This cur proceeded to invoke Tim's name 5 times during a self-serving political pitch for offshore drilling. Let me just quote Paddy Chayefsky's screenplay for his film The Hospital. Congressman Issa, you're greedy, unfeeling, inept, indifferent, self-inflating, and unconscionably profitable. Besides that, I have nothing against you. Congressman Darrell Issa, I'm sorry, Representative, he is not human, therefore man is the wrong term. Issa, today's worst person in the world.